Hello and welcome. This is your instructor Dennis Westman, and today on this video I'd like to talk about tutorial 5 and specifically 5.1, which is about manipulating and arranging data. In subsequent videos I'll talk about sections 5.2 and 5.3. So as we've done in previous times, would you please go ahead and get your textbook out, and we're going to start in tutorial 5, which begins on page 233. And as usual, if you'll just follow along with me, maybe highlight some things if I point them out, and then what I'll do is I'll look down at my textbook, refer to where we are, and then look back up at the camera throughout this video. So again, thank you for joining me, and this is tutorial 5 and specifically section 5.1 beginning on page 233. In 5.1 deals a lot with ranges of data and allowing you to freeze rows and columns and formatting the various sections of Excel tables, and then also just sorting the data. And as I said earlier, we're going to begin on page 233, which is the introduction. 234, 235 talks a little bit about and demonstrates the view of the Excel table and the various methods that you can sort and filter different aspects of data. And you can kind of see across the top of that Excel table, specifically in row 1, you can see the row headings and then some little drop down arrows to the right of each column heading that allows a person to go in and actually sort and filter the various data elements. I'll talk a little bit more about those in just a moment. Looking on page 236, it talks about planning a range of data, and I can't stress this enough that whenever you're designing something that is going to be used for data manipulation, you're going to sort, you're going to filter, you're going to query the data, you want to spend some time planning exactly how you want to arrange the columns and then how you want to arrange the rows. So you definitely want to think about how are you going to arrange it. By far, the vast majority of these Excel tables are arranged with columns with headings at the tops of the columns across the top, and then each row represents one record or one particular item specific to a particular person. So the column headings end up being the fields, and the rows end up being the individual records. And so that's what pages 236 and 237 talk about, is planning for and designing your various items related to your structured data range. Page 239 talks more about creating that in terms of an Excel table. And you definitely want to make sure that you spend some time planning it and then reading the items in the blue, especially on page 239, that gives you some additional insight. For instance, this section talks about saving time with Excel table features, and you definitely want to use that because that'll help you to design really nice looking tables that function well but also look nice if you ever need to print those out. Page 240 talks about renaming an Excel table, and by default it just names it as table 1 whenever you create an Excel table, but you can actually name it to whatever you want just depending on your particular needs, and talks about how you are able to do that on page 240 and page 241. Also talks a little bit about formatting an Excel table. This is similar to those of you that have had Word, being able to go in and assign columns and rows, certain colors, font types, font styles. You can actually do that in different styles, and that's talked about on page 241. And then page 241 at the bottom, and then subsequent pages, talks about adding records, which again, as I mentioned earlier, a record is essentially a row of data within a table. And so it talks about how you can just add rows of data to the Excel table that you've created. And it also talks about how to find and edit records, which is on page 243. You know, maybe you need to update someone's record, update their street address, their city, state, zip, that kind of thing. It gives you a little information on how to update the records. And then finally, if you need to delete a record, on page 244 talks about how to actually go in and delete. Of course, as always, you always want to pay careful attention before you delete something to make sure that you truly do want to delete it, because you certainly don't want to lose any data doing that. Page 244 also begins our discussion about sorting data, and this is just changing the actual sequence of the data. Maybe you want to sort it by last name or by first name, alphabetically, by the smallest number to the largest number, or vice versa. And that talks about how to actually go in and sort the data. And I must tell you that I use Excel tables extensively, and I use them a lot with data, and I use the sort and the filter to be able to go in and pull out and extract certain pieces of data that I feel are important. Now, we haven't talked about filtering yet, but we have talked about sorting, and that's discussed again on page 245 and 240. Well, 244 starts out with, and 245, and so on. And then you can also use a custom list, and then this is just, for instance, maybe you want to customize and only display a certain number of items with a condition. This is what the customized list will allow you to do, and it talks about how to create that on page 248, specifically in the yellow boxes, but also in the pinkish mauve looking boxes. It talks about how to create a custom list. Now that's all for section 5.1. I'll create additional videos for 5.2 and 5.3 on the pivot tables and the pivot charts, but I wanted to get this one out just so that you can have a basic understanding of creating Excel tables and the data. So again, columns typically are the fields, and then you have the rows, which are the individual records, and then you'll turn on the sorting by going up to the top on the ribbon and selecting the data part, and then picking the filter option, which will allow you to sort. Whenever you apply a theme, that applies the same kind of font formatting to the various aspects of the table. To add new rows, you simply go down to the very last cell, press tab, enter, whatever, and it will take you down to the next row, applying that formatting on down. I always encourage people to look at page 249 to look at the quick check, because that's essentially what I just went over and what that section particularly talks about. As usual, if you have any questions, feel free to post them to the lab questions discussion board, and I'll be happy to answer them, or your fellow students will be happy to answer them as well. And as always, you can wait for a response there. We're getting pretty good about responding to those, and I really appreciate everyone's efforts in helping each other out, because it really does help me out. As I mentioned before, I try to check those daily. I get notifications because I subscribe to them, and then sometimes someone else has beat me to the punch by answering it, so I really do appreciate everyone's help with that. Look for tutorial 5, sections 2 and 3 a little bit later. And as again, if you have any questions, just post them to the graded or the lab questions area in the course. Thank you, and have a great day.